friends. Welcome to the podcast. It's episode 4 here at Aim and Anchor. My name is Brandon. I'm an Enneagram coach, and if you're new with us, like I said, there's 3 other episodes so far, and if you don't know anything about the Enneagram, I would suggest going back and listening to episode 1 and 2, and it'll give you a little bit of a structured breakdown, that sort of thing, and then episode 3 from last week, we broke down each one of the types and went through their core fear, their core desire, their core virtue, their core weakness, and the message that their heart longs to hear. And I really enjoyed that episode because we're starting to get into the flow of what I want the podcast to be, which is practical tools and tips for you to take with you throughout the week and implement those into daily life, whether you're at work, at home, whatever relationship you find yourself in with your kids, your spouse, your partner, whatever it might be. But these tips and tools, I really feel like they're beneficial to each one of us in the 9 types. And like I said, if you don't know anything about the Enneagram, those first 3 episodes will basically give you structure, background, and then breakdown of each of the 9 types. And then today, this is probably the one I'm the most excited about, which is we're starting to get into a little bit more of the specifics on what each type deals with and how they differ from the other. And so today, if you've been listening to the podcast at all, you know that today, episode 4, we're going to be talking about defense mechanisms for each type. And then we're going to talk about how to narrate through that, because a lot of times as humans, we attach these emotions, feelings, and thoughts to us as a person, and we have a hard time separating ourselves, and then it becomes all-encompassing, and we're completely overwhelmed. And so this is really where I want to get us to go, and I'm very excited about what's next for the podcast. So that if you don't know, we release a new podcast every Sunday, and they're 10 to 15 minutes, although I will say, just a quick side note, because I really want to make sure I'm below 15 minutes. I know that episode 3 was like 22 or 23 minutes. I'm working on it, okay? My hope and goal is to cut that down, and we're going to get under 15 minutes here. And today, we just might do it. I don't know. So I hope this finds you well. If you're doing the dishes, driving to work, whatever the case may be, I will do my best to keep it under 15 minutes. So before we get into defense mechanisms today, just a quick reiteration. If you have any questions, shoot me an email, brandon@aimandanchorcoaching.com. If you want to schedule a free call, go over to the website, aimandanchorcoaching.com, and there's a button in the top right corner. Just go ahead and click that, and we can schedule a time to get together and chat. Also, always on internet, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, the places. I think we might even start TikTok. Who knows? I don't know. I might be too old for TikTok. When you're in your 30s, you get made fun of for a lot of stuff because you're so old now. I didn't realize I was this old. All right, I digress. We don't want to waste any more time because we're already 4 minutes, maybe 5 minutes into this thing, which means I've got 10 minutes left to go through all the content that I have for us today. All right, here we go. Episode 4, defense mechanisms. I'm going to go just 1 through 9, and we're going to talk about the title of each of the defense mechanisms, and then we're going to break that down. All right, our type 1s, the moral reformers, their defense mechanism is reaction formation. And just to define reaction formation, it's people who try to reduce or eliminate anxiety caused by their own thoughts, feelings, or behaviors that they consider being unacceptable. So if you remember from last week, episode 3, the core fear of the type 1 is that they are going to be bad, or they believe themselves to be bad. So if you remember that back, their core fear was corruptness, imbalance, or just simply being bad, and their core weakness is anger. And so when they get into the space of being defensive, or that anger starts to show up in their world, reaction formation comes in, and they try to reduce or eliminate that anxiety that's caused by their own inner thoughts. And if you ever ask them one, if you have a 1 in your world, my brother is a type 1. Well, one of my brothers is a type 1. I don't know what the other one is. I'll figure it out. But my brother who lives here in town, he is a type 1. And I've just asked him some questions and things. And he says that he worries constantly, all the time. He's playing things over in his head, and that loud inner critic that all ones have, that just berating voice that just constantly haunts them. It's the thing that causes their anxiety to skyrocket. When it's untethered and just it has free reign, it goes crazy. So for my type 1 friends, when you're feeling that internal anxiety increasing because your own thoughts, feelings, or behaviors, because you think that you're bad or you've been bad, like now that you know that that's a thing in your world, once you see that start to rise up to the surface, take a pause, take a breath, and then say, what am I defensive about? Okay, I want to say every type. This isn't just for once, but for every type. What am I defensive about? What's getting under my skin right now? And begin to separate that feeling, that stress, that anxiety. Separate that out from you, the person, and say, hey, I'm feeling this thing. Why? And just narrate it, literally. Narrate it out loud. Don't do it internally. And maybe if you're in the middle of a coffee shop, well, we can't go to a coffee shop right now because we're in the middle of a global pandemic. But maybe don't start talking to yourself in the middle of a crowd. You might catch a couple of glares, but narrate that out. Why am I feeling this anxiety? Why is this internal thing really skyrocketing? Why is that internal voice just getting louder and louder? Separate that out, okay? Our type 2 friends, their defense mechanism is repression. And that it sounds like this. People who hide information about themselves from themselves. This information, it can be feelings, desires, wishes, aversions, fears, even needs. These are too difficult to acknowledge consciously, so they push down inside themselves in order to control it. So if you remember again from last week, I'm going to be referencing stuff all the time like this, but remember from last week, 2s are the most relational type on the Enneagram. They love people. They love being in relationship. They spend all their time thinking about relationships, how to better it, all of that stuff. And when they get stressed out or defensive, they push down the thing that need or that want that's coming up inside of them, and then they look out to other people to see if they can get that help. So again, I'm going to read it again. The title of the defense mechanism for our type 2 friends is repression. It's defined as people who hide information about themselves from themselves. This information can be feelings, desires, wishes, aversions, fears, and even needs. These are too difficult to acknowledge consciously, so they push it down inside of themselves in order to control it. All right? So again, for my type 2 friends, once you feel that need to control, that need to push that need or desire that you know you have farther down and focus on others outside of yourself in order to ignore or avoid that, you narrate it out. You said, what am I avoiding? Am I contacting this person or trying to be in relationship with this person right now because I'm avoiding something that I don't want to deal with? And again, that's hard. That's super, super hard. I get it. But it's going to be healthier in the long run. Okay? All right. My type 3 friends. Your defense mechanism is identification. It goes like this. These people unconsciously incorporate attributes and characteristics of another person into their own personality and sense of self as a way of bolstering their self-esteem by forming an imaginary or real alliance with a person that they admire. I'm going to say that again because it's kind of a mouthful. Identification sounds like this. Type 3s unconsciously incorporate attributes and characteristics of another person into their own personality and sense of self as a way of bolstering their self-esteem by forming an imaginary or real alliance with a person that they admire. So what that looks like for our type 3 friends, again, this is unconscious behavior. This is unhealthy, unawake, asleep behavior that we all do, but just looks like this for our type 3 friends. They find somebody that they admire, which probably already exists in their world, and then begin replacing self with someone else in order to make sure that it looks like they've got it all together, even when they don't. Because remember from last episode, I'm going to keep referencing that, their ego fixation, when ego takes over, vanity plays the biggest part for our type 3 friends, more so than anybody else. Our 2s, 3s, and 4s all deal with vanity because they're in that shame triad. Remember, that's from episode 2. But they deal with vanity, our type 3s, more so than any other type on the Enneagram. So when that shows up, this is unconscious. So you got to really ask a lot of questions of yourself. What am I doing? What am I trying to avoid? What am I trying to fill in from someone else, my type 3s, so that I feel okay or so that I look okay, that I'm presented okay to the world? Narrate that out loud. Type 4s, your defense mechanism is introjection. Instead of repelling critical information and negative experiences that cause both anxiety and or pain, they introject information. This means that they fully absorb, internalize, and incorporate the data of their sense of self. Our type 4s, the way that I love to hear it explained is like when they're asleep or unwell, they feel like they are they're on the Isle of Misfit Toys from that claymation Christmas movie. I think it's Rudolph. Pretty sure it's Rudolph. But yeah, they feel like they're on the outside of the party with their face up against the glass, looking in, going, why wasn't I invited? And what am I missing that people don't want to know about me or want me? And so when they get into that space, they take all of that stuff, internalize it, and like I said last week, they don't have emotions. They become their emotions, and then they live in the dark places. And the opposite of like our 7 friends who love to live in the happy, positive places. 7s and 4s are good for each other because they balance each other out. But again, 4s, introjection. Instead of repelling critical information and negative experiences that cause anxiety or pain, they introject the information, which means that they fully absorb, internalize, and incorporate the data of their sense of self. So the question I have for my 4s is, or the question I want you 4s to ask yourself as you're narrating is, what am I internalizing? What emotion am I just feeding off of in order to get my unique sense of self worth out into the world? Type 5s, isolation is your defense mechanism. These are people who avoid feeling overwhelmed by People who avoid feeling overwhelmed and empty by isolating themselves, retreating into their minds, cutting themselves off from their feelings and other people, and compartmentalizing their life, which ends up separating them from other people because they literally have boxes of, this is where I'm at right now. And I know, like, if anybody knows me, there's definitely boxes in my brain that I love. I call it my nothing box. I'm sure that a lot of type 9s have that box, but it's a wonderful space to be. I really enjoy it, but we won't go there yet. We'll get there. Isolation for our type 5s looks like when you get home from work, or when you are done with a thing that you didn't realize was going to be such an expenditure. Most of our type 5 friends have some sort of secret reclusive place that they go to. So not only do they have their home that they can go to, but inside their home, usually, they have another secret space that's just for them. And in a lot of ways, this helps build their energy back up because, like I said last week, I know I keep referencing, they have the least amount of energy, relational energy, on the Enneagram. And so when interactions with other people happen that aren't planned for, it drains them quick. So they need the space. But my type 5s, how much space is too much? That's the question. When you start to isolate more than you need to because it's safe and it's comfortable, you end up, like I said last week, living on the frame of life and not jumping into the picture. So ask yourself, when you're isolating, am I isolating because I'm exhausted, or am I isolating because I just don't have to deal with people? And sometimes you need to stretch that. Our type 6 friends, projection is your defense mechanism. People who unconsciously attribute their own unacceptable, unwanted, sorry, I said that word wrong. I'm going to say it again. People who unconsciously attribute their own unacceptable, unwanted, or disowned thoughts, emotions, motivations, attributes, and or behaviors to others. One more time. Projection is people who unconsciously attribute their own unacceptable, unwanted, or disowned thoughts, emotions, motivations, attributes, and or behaviors to others. Remember, our type 6 friends have fear like no one else, fear of fear itself, and they need safety. They want to know that they are safe. That's the message that their heart longs to hear. You are safe. And when they get into a space, remember last week we talked about the panel of voices that's inside the head of a 6. When they lose confidence in themselves, and the panel just takes over and they get stuck, they get locked up, that's when we start to see the downfall of the 6. Emotional, everything takes over and fear takes over. And then worst case scenario, thinking starts to take over. They start to project out onto everyone else that you are not safe. You're not, you don't have my best interest in mind. They love a really good authority figure. And so when that starts to become questioned, or the doubt comes into their brain, that's a big downfall for them. So my 6 friends in projection, ask yourself as you're beginning to, even like, let's say you're meeting somebody new, or you have a relationship that you've had that's been around for a while. Be cautious of how much you're pushing out onto that other person, that projecting of your unconscious attributes that you're pushing on to others, because that's a good indicator that that's something internally you've got to work through. So narrate out, what am I projecting? What am I thinking about this other person? And then ask the question, is this actually something that I need to deal with internally? Type 7s, rationalization. These are people who explain their thoughts, feelings, and behaviors to themselves and others in a way that completely avoids or obscures their true motivations, intentions, or the effects of their behavior, which means they normally turn a negative thing into positive. Remember last week I talked about 7s are the kings and queens of silver lining, okay? So when they find themselves in a space that is difficult, trying, burdensome, and they're feeling defensive about that, they rationalize and they start spinning. They can spin like you would not believe. And if you're a 7, you know what I'm talking about. So you have to ask yourself the question, am I avoiding the pain of something in my life because I really just don't want to deal with it? That's probably true. So the question you ask is, what am I avoiding? What am I spinning? Our type 8 friends, denial is your defense mechanism. And these are people who unconsciously negate something that makes them feel anxious by disavowing its very existence. This can be thoughts, feelings, wishes, sensations, needs, or even relationships that are dissatisfactory or upsetting to them. One more time, people who unconsciously negate something that makes them feel anxious by disavowing its very existence. This can be thoughts, feelings, wishes, sensations, needs, or even relationships that are dissatisfactory or upsetting to them. So if you have a type 8 in your world, or you are a type 8, denial is your defense mechanism. When the defenses come up, you can and will deny thoughts, feelings, wishes, sensations that you feel are dissatisfactory. And so the question you can ask yourself, or you can ask someone, your significant other, someone that's in your world that you're close to, What is it that you're denying right now? And again, this is unconscious, so that's why you have to narrate this out loud. You have to ask yourself, I'm feeling anxious, so what am I completely deciding does not exist? Our type 9s, again, I'm a type 9. Narcotization is our defense mechanism. And these are people who unconsciously numb themselves to avoid something that feels too large, complex, or difficult. Something that's uncomfortable to handle by engaging in routines that are familiar and require very little attention and provide comfort. Again, that goes like this. People who unconsciously numb themselves to avoid something that feels too large, complex, difficult, or uncomfortable to handle by engaging in routines that are familiar and require very little attention and provide comfort. So for some of us type 9s, that can look like sleeping. It could look like video games, vegging out on shows, binging Netflix hard, shopping, eating, anything that's a comfortable routine. 9s, you got to ask yourself, am I here? Am I actually present doing this, or am I avoiding a conflict or an emotion that feels too large, or that feels uncomfortable or out of my control? Again, our type 9s, we're asleep to ourselves. We're asleep to our anger, our feelings, our emotions. We're asleep to pretty much most of it. And it permeates everything about life. So ask yourself this question. As you feel the feeling come on to veg out, to numb out, to drink, to smoke, to eat too much, to whatever the case may be, ask yourself, what am I avoiding? Why am I trying to numb myself? Okay? That's your defense mechanism. So from the top, type 1s, reaction formation. Type 2s, repression. Type 3s, identification. Type 4s, introjection. Type 5s, isolation. 6s, projection. 7s, rationalization. 8s, denial. And 9s, narcotization. There's the end of episode 4 for you guys. As you go through your week, think about that. As you maybe you don't know your type and you're trying to figure out what your type is. See how you're trying to ignore and or replace something that you're trying to not deal with. These are all unconscious behaviors, and they affect everyday life. I hope this finds you well. Be good to one another. Be kind to yourself. Give yourself a break. And remember, if you don't know what's holding you back, how can you really move forward? Have a great week, and we'll see you guys on Sunday. Bye, everybody.